Battlefield 1. Released in October 2016, this World War I title is making its way towards being 3 years old. And of course it's no longer the current Battlefield title, with Battlefield 5 taking that mantle. But as is almost always the way, new players once try out the experience for a now bargain price, old players return hooked on nostalgia, and those dissatisfied with the latest release in the series come back to try to find a gaming home again. So is it worth it? Is Battlefield 1 still a viable and rewarding use of your time at this stage? Well, today I hope to answer those questions for you. I'll be approaching it from different angles in order to make something of use for as many of you as possible. So I'll touch upon comparisons with Battlefield 5 and the experience for those who are totally new to this kind of game. I'm GetGoodGuy and this is Battlefield 1 in 2019. Many creators are flocking back to Battlefield 1, often with the attitude that all is forgiven for previous failings, or at least they're now far more willing to put those same issues aside now that they're unimpressed with Battlefield 5. This can make it hard to get a clear idea of the actual state of Battlefield 1, so I'm not going to do that today. I've covered Battlefield for around 2.5 years now, essentially from the release of Battlefield 1 onwards. I intensely enjoyed BF1 for a long time, but I also had massive reservations about certain aspects. The passing of time and any dissatisfaction with Battlefield 5 hasn't changed this. So as an indicator of how this video is going to turn out, I think Battlefield 1 is still an entirely mixed bag. An engaging, exciting, and somewhat but not entirely authentic World War I experience, but with many design and balance flaws that can become extremely grating. It's a game that can be an exceptional experience for the right consumer, but this isn't even close to being a guarantee for all. I don't buy into this just play BF1 mantra that many now appear to have just because it isn't Battlefield 5. But in the interest of giving the game as fair a shot as possible, let's cover some of the main plus points. Well, above all else, it's atmospheric. If you want to feel like you're in an actual battle, this game brings that. I can't exactly explain why Battlefield 1 has this to a greater degree than Battlefield 5, but I feel it does. Some games just have that intangible factor, that feeling built up by audio design, art style, and many other aspects. The rumble of tanks, planes flying overhead, MP40 bullets whizzing past you, all of these kind of aspects blend to create an extremely enticing experience, even this long after release. Coming back to this game after playing Battlefield 5, I was still struck by essentially its beauty. I don't think it's as sharp and clear from a graphical perspective, but it looks exceptional in terms of what it's trying to convey. Now, I know one of the key concerns for Battlefield 5 players is visibility. How effectively can you see the enemy? And rather than the simplistic answer of it's better that I'm seeing thrown around a lot, I'd like to cover it in a bit more detail and say it's both better and worse. In terms of it being better, I find soldiers, both enemy and friendly, to have more of a physical presence. They're chunkier, more physically imposing and noticeable. They don't easily blend into the environment. Now, those that just want to play passively, try to lie down and stay camouflaged, this game isn't going to be anywhere near as friendly to you as Battlefield 5. It's not, I guess, realistic in that manner. Personally, I prefer gameplay over realism as long as the game is still convincing, but your preferences are of course your own. Now, this visibility difference is further intensified by the inclusion of basic player spotting. Battlefield 1 has a spotting command that doesn't rely upon any specific mechanics. So whereas Battlefield 5 requires spotting via suppression on a support combat role, through using a spotting scope and other such mechanics, on Battlefield 1 you simply look at the enemy, press a key or button depending on your platform, and they're spotted. This has pros and cons. Being constantly taken down by campers is much less of an issue, but by the same token, going on a dangerous but potentially rewarding flank is much less viable due to the ease with which you can appear on every single enemy's minimap. So now, with all of that said, you may wonder how visibility could possibly be worse in some ways. Well, for me, that comes down to the level of contrast present in the game. I spoke about this many times when BF1 was the current Battlefield release. The brights are so very bright and the darks can be so very dark. And not in the way that Battlefield 5 has dark areas. I mean, the genuine contrast between light and dark is wildly exaggerated. It's like being in a J.J. Abrams movie. There's lens flare here, there, and everywhere. The sun is, well, as bright as the sun, to be fair, but it can be oppressively prevalent. Looking out of a window is a goddamn nightmare sometimes, if you don't want your retinas burnt to a crisp. And just generally, the contrast is ridiculous. It was one of my biggest gripes with the game before, and it still is now. It honestly hurts my eyes to play for extended sessions sometimes. times. Now, altering your own brightness and contrast settings can help, and I did do that during collecting this footage, but the problem is that you need to be doing it nearly constantly. Dark maps are impossible to see on, with the settings that you use to see on bright maps. So for me, that's a definite negative, but at least spotting helps to negate this where seeing enemies is concerned. Basically, I'm glad to have spotting in Battlefield 1, but I also kinda like not having it in Battlefield 5, even if that game does have poor visibility overall. Moving on, what about the gameplay itself? Well, it feels pretty fast-paced and action-packed, certainly for a shooter with maps as big as this, and especially when compared with Battlefield 5. BF5 can at times be a very slow slog. Battlefield 1 has far less of these moments, so if you like high action, this game may well be a good shout for you. It's not comparable with, say, running around the tight enclosed maps of Call of Duty, where you can often be having a gunfight every 5 to 10 seconds, but there's still enough stimulation to keep most players engaged. It's also a far more sniper-friendly experience than Battlefield 5, at least on console. It's not that you can't snipe on Battlefield 5, of course, but many feel the sniping on Battlefield 5 is less rewarding. It certainly just feels different to me. Now, BF1 has the sweet spot mechanic, meaning many snipers can one-shot kill to the chest depending upon range, which BF5 doesn't have. But there's no attrition in BF5, so there are less people running around injured. This kind of balances things out, at least to a certain degree. I can't really comment upon sniping on PC, but I assume it's a similar situation, but to a lesser extent, as aiming and hitting the target with a mouse is far easier. I think a large component of this whole thing is that guns kill so quickly in BF5 that using a sniper rifle sometimes just feels kinda pointless, especially when you're using thumbsticks, and that isn't the case on BF1. But again, you're open to disagree. And then I find that there are many more available playstyles in Battlefield 1 than in Battlefield 5, due to how many distinctly different weapons there are. Yes, the weapons in Battlefield 5 are different from each other, but it feels like there are much more specific options available in BF1, and I like that. The downside being that there's little customization to be done in terms of how these weapons then behave, due to BF1 not having a specialization mechanic, whereas BF5 has. On top of this, BF1 seems to have an at least mostly functional team balancer, as in the teams are generally even in terms of numbers, and the game at least tries to balance based upon skill. I don't think it works very well, but at least it tries. And without just ranting about it, Battlefield 5 still has neither of those. And finally, for the overall positives, there are still enough people playing the game in order to find a match pretty quickly and easily, and hit the population limit for each match. But this doesn't apply to all modes. The more popular ones you're good to go on, but others appear to be dead. For example, I couldn't find a Frontlines game in the whole of Europe when I searched, which was disappointing but not exactly surprising at this stage. And so with that covered, and before I get into the real downsides of the BF1 experience, I'm going to go over some of the more prevalent differences between BF1 and BF5, which won't be seen as being universally negative or positive. It will depend upon personal preference. So the gunplay is different, quite wildly different actually, which is why some of my aiming looks so off in this video. I'd forgotten just how different it felt to BF5. There's extremely noticeable spread, meaning you can't reliably hit targets at range with all weapons, unlike in BF5, and that's especially apparent if you don't burst fire. Couple that with much more noticeable recoil and you've got a more demanding and difficult gunplay experience. I'm not saying it's better or worse, it'll just come down to what you like. I also feel like BF1 is a much more vehicle dominated experience. They just come across as being much more powerful and sway the tide of battle much more easily and frequently. So again, without saying whether it's good or bad, if you're into vehicle play, then this is a plus point for you. If you're much more into infantry play, then this will likely be seen as a negative. And this game has sentries or elites. These are kits that you pick up which grant you more health and a special weapon, such as things like the Villaparosa, the flamethrower, and other options. For context, if you don't understand, the clips where you've seen me bayonet down a particularly beefy looking enemy, that was an elite. Now they grew tiresome for me when I played BF1, as they just basically felt kinda cheap. But coming back now, I don't really mind them, and they add another layer to the experience. The same can't be said however for the behemoths in my opinion, but that is just my opinion. Some people like them. These are hulking great vehicles that are often provided for the side that's losing, such as the Giant Zeppelin. They're super powerful and again add another layer to the experience that you may or may not like. And so onto what I consider to be the clear negatives, although again, you may of course disagree. Well, upon coming back to BF1, I instantly had issues matchmaking with friends. There's seemingly no good reason for this, and I'd entirely forgotten about it. Trying to search for or join a game with friends can be a nightmare, as the game decides to simply not complete the action for everybody. This resulted in needing to quit and restart the application a couple of times to get it to work, and this does become very frustrating very quickly. Then there's that there will be very high ping players you have to deal with. Because although there are enough players playing in order to easily find games, there aren't so many that you or other players are going to be placed into a quality ping lobby. For example, this image here. I chose a low ping lobby for me, but seemingly many others from far away in the world got placed here as well, with 100 or 200 plus ping. Or they simply chose this lobby because they don't have much else to work with now. Then in terms of actually playing the game, the mantling system is as annoying as ever, with it often not recognizing what you can and can't climb over. And you frequently end up lying on the floor when instead you wanted to climb. Combine this with an inability to do anything while jumping, including reloading or firing your weapon, as you can see here, and this feels like a very limited experience in terms of being a movement-based player, even when compared with Battlefield 5. I also feel that suppression in Battlefield 1 is extremely annoying, a sentiment seemingly shared by many as it was changed for Battlefield 5. In BF1, bullets being fired near you darken your screen, cause screen shake, and just make it a pretty unenjoyable and unintuitive experience, rewarding the enemy for just spraying somewhere near you and rendering you near useless while it's happening. And while we're on the topic of what I find irritating, planes. You don't have to agree with me, although I know many do, but planes are extremely annoying in this game. They can absolutely decimate infantry, and it's an extremely common occurrence to see pilots at the top of the scoreboard at the end of the game. They're just a constant irritation in larger modes. If you put all of this together, well, things can be pretty damn random. Some may say that's war, and that's okay. If you want that, then great. But if you want a balanced and somewhat reasoned experience, you're probably going to become frustrated with constant explosions, planes bombing you, and suppression very quickly. And so my solution was to do what I used to do, and play the smaller modes. And this was when I realized that I essentially do the same thing in Battlefield 5, in that I go looking for what I enjoy, and I focus upon that. That's the beauty of both games. It can appeal to different kinds of players. If you find what you enjoy, then Battlefield 1 can not only be just a worthwhile use of your time, but a truly thrilling and rewarding one. Kills are satisfying, the environments are detailed, and the atmosphere is intense and convincing. I genuinely highly recommend coming back, finding what you enjoy in the game, and just giving it a chance. Whether it's your first time playing it, or you're a returning Battlefield veteran, it's still a great game in 2019, even if it's also undeniably flawed. And so I ask, what do you think? Do you enjoy Battlefield 1? Have you tried it? And do you intend to now? Let me know in the comments below. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, leaving a like would be awesome for me. Subscribe and turn on notifications to see more, and please feel free to join my Discord server in the description and my pinned comment to get involved with this community. Here's the Board of Awesome for the epic people who support the channel on Patreon. They're all absolute heroes, and I love them all deeply and often. If you want to join them on the Board of Awesome, the link to the Patreon page is in the description and my pinned comment. And with that all said, I'm GetGoodGuy, this was Battlefield 1, and I'll see you next time. Laters.